All right, so today we're diving into the world of Pat McAfee and trying to figure out if he's a true innovator, changing the game, or just really good at pushing buttons. You guys sent us a ton of stuff about this guy, his career stats articles about all those controversies, even a big piece from The New Yorker on how he's impacting sports media. It seems like you really want to get him figured out, and we do too.
What's fascinating about McAfee is he's like a master of reinvention. He's gone from pro football to pro wrestling to podcasting, and now he's this big name on ESPN. And through it all, he's built up this larger than life persona that can be pretty outrageous.
Oh yeah, he definitely knows how to make an entrance. But to get how he got here, let's rewind back to the beginning. His story starts in Plum, Pennsylvania, where he was already this star athlete, but his talent as a kicker in high school really made him stand out.
He was so good that he was actually getting paid illegally for his kicking skills. It's kind of like a little early sign of the rule bending that would become part of his image.
Wow, illegal payments in high school. That's wild. He must have been something truly special to get that kind of attention even back then.
He was West Virginia University. They offered him a scholarship just based on his kicking. They didn't even really look at anything else. Their coach drove all the way to Plum just to watch McAfee kick one time. That's how talented this guy was.
So I could see why he was such a hot prospect coming out of college. But how does a star kicker become a punter in the NFL?
Well, the Indianapolis Colts, I saw something in him, drafted him in 2009, and while he had this crazy field goal range, they decided to focus on his punting, and he quickly became one of the best in the league.
I guess it takes a certain type to really excel at punting. You're not always in the spotlight. Do you think that's where his dramatic side comes in?
It's possible. Think about it. Punters, they come in during these high-pressure situations. They need to be cool under pressure and have a bit of showmanship to perform well under those circumstances. So maybe all those years, punting helped him develop the confidence and that stage presence that we see now.
That's a really good point. And he wasn't
Yeah.
just any punter. He was the Colts' emergency quarterback, which you don't see very often.
Exactly. Most teams wouldn't trust their punter to throw the ball, but McAfee had that athleticism, and the Colts believed in him. It shows how versatile he is and how he can kind of go beyond what people expect.
So after a pretty successful NFL career, he retires and then launches the Pat McAfee Show in 2019. This seems like a big turning point where we really start to see his personality come through.
Absolutely. The podcast was this mix of sports talk, comedy, big-name guests. He even got Aaron Rodgers to be a regular guest, which is huge. That move right there showed he had serious connections and influence in the sports world.
It's clear he knows how to bring in the big names and create that buzz. But how did he go from podcasting to landing a gig with the super straight-laced ESPN?
Yeah, that was a shock to a lot of people. In 2023, he joined College Game Day, which is known for being really traditional and polished. You can imagine the clash of styles when this loud, unfiltered personality landed right in the middle of it all.
I'm picturing him showing up in jeans and a t-shirt when everyone else is in suits. Was there any tension behind the scenes because of that?
The New Yorker article describes him as constantly being underdressed compared to his co-hosts. It's almost like he was trying to disrupt things on purpose, which, knowing McAfee, wouldn't be surprising at all.
So we have this guy who's not afraid to challenge the norms, and now he's got this huge platform that sounds like a recipe for controversy. And speaking of controversy, where do we even begin with this guy? He's had a lot of, let's just say, questionable moments.
Oh, there's definitely a lot to unpack there. McAfee's got this history of making statements that some people find funny, others find offensive, and most find, well, somewhere in between. Where should we start?
Let's start with the one that really put him in hot water, the Caitlin Clark incident. Can you remind us what happened there?
This was June 2024. McAfee was on his show talking about Caitlin Clark, the WNBA rookie, who was taking the league by storm. He even called her a superstar, acknowledging her talent and impact.
So far, so good. What went wrong?
Well, then he used this really derogatory and sexist term to refer to her. I won't repeat it here, but it's the kind of language that just has no place in sports commentary or anywhere else, really.
It's so disappointing to hear, especially since he was trying to praise her. The reaction must have been intense.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Social media blew up with criticism. People were calling for him to be fired from ESPN. Even Serena Williams, one of the greatest athletes of all time, she called out McAfee and another athlete at the ESPYs for using that kind of language towards women.
Wow, to be called out by Serena Williams on that stage,
Yeah.
that's huge. How did McAfee respond to all of this?
He put out an apology on Twitter just a few hours after he made the comment, and he addressed it on his show, too. He said that he has too much respect for Clark to have those words out there representing his feelings towards her.
It sounds like he knew he messed up. Did he ever apologize to Clark directly?
He says he sent a personal apology through the Indiana Fever's PR team, But even in his apology, there was this weird element of deflection, almost blaming the universe for his word choice.
That's strange. It sounds like he was trying to take responsibility, but also trying to distance himself from what he said at the same time.
Exactly. It left a lot of people wondering if he really understood how much his words hurt, or if he was just trying to protect his image.
And what about ESPN? Did they do anything about it?
They were surprisingly quiet through the whole thing. No public statements, no suspension. It seemed like they were hoping it would all just go away.
That's interesting. Makes you wonder about their priorities. Are they more concerned with protecting their star talent than with addressing harmful language?
It definitely raises some questions about how they handle these situations. And remember, this wasn't McAfee's first time being controversial. He had that public feud with ESPN executive Norby Williamson earlier in the year.
Right. He accused Williamson of trying to sabotage his show, right?
Yeah, he said Williamson was manipulating the ratings to make him look bad. He felt like Williamson and maybe some other execs didn't like his unconventional style and were trying to get rid of him.
So he's publicly fighting with a top executive at the same time he's making these offensive comments. That's a bold move.
And it didn't stop there. Remember that very public, very heated argument he had with Stephen A. Smith?
Wait, Stephen A. Smith? That seems like a recipe for disaster.
They got into it over a project. Smith was producing McAfee, even cursed at Smith at one point.
Wow, this guy really doesn't back down from conflict, does he? It's like he enjoys it.
There's definitely a pattern here. He pushes boundaries, sometimes crosses the line, and then there's backlash. He apologizes, but then it seems to happen all over again.
It makes you wonder, is he genuinely trying to change things and challenge how things are done? Or is he just using controversy to stay relevant and boost his own brand?
That's a tough question to answer. He's obviously talented and entertaining, but he's also done some real damage with his actions. The fact that he's still a big name in sports media after all this says something about us, too.
That's a great point. Are we as viewers too quick to forgive him because we find him entertaining? Are we putting his talent above the impact of his words?
These are questions we all need to think about. It's easy to get caught up in the drama and the entertainment, but we can't ignore the consequences.
Speaking of consequences, let's talk about his surprise return to WWE in early 2024. Did that raise any eyebrows considering he was working with ESPN?
Definitely. It was classic McAfee, bold, unpredictable, guaranteed to get people talking. He showed up as a guest commentator at the Royal Rumble and then shocked everyone by entering the men's Royal Rumble match himself.
He always has to be in the center of the action, doesn't he? Even when it's not clear what his priorities are.
That's the thing with Pat McAfee. He's got all this talent and he's successful in these completely different worlds, but he also seems to need constant attention and approval.
It's like he's addicted to the spotlight, even if it means burning bridges and alienating people along the way.
Which brings us back to the big question, is he a visionary or a grifter? Is he really trying to change the game, or is he just playing it to his advantage no matter who gets hurt?
It's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. He's capable of amazing things, but he's also got some serious flaws, and it's up to each of us to decide how we feel about him, weigh his talent against his bad behavior, and decide if he's someone we want to support.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? He's capable of amazing things, but he's also got some serious flaws. And it's up to each of us to decide how we feel about him, weigh his talent against his bad behavior, and decide if he's someone we want to support.
It's a conversation we need to be having, especially these days where guys like McAfee can have so much influence. But before we wrap up, we have to talk about one more incident that really shows how complicated this all is.
You're talking about that on-air clash with Ryan Leaf and Kirk Herbstreit.
Exactly. Leaf was a guest analyst on College Game Day,
Yeah.
and he made a comment about a game being the Nobody Wants Us Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
He meant it as a joke, but it rubbed some people the wrong way, including Herbstreit, one of the main guys on the show.
Yeah, Herbstreit felt like it was disrespectful to the players and the fans, and McAfee being McAfee, jumped right in, defending Leaf and criticizing Herbstreit for being too sensitive.
So once again, McAfee's inserting himself into a conflict this time. It's with his own colleagues. What happened after that?
Things got pretty messy. McAfee even brought up Leaf's past struggles and Washington State's football history on his own show. It was like he was trying to make things worse instead of better.
That's interesting. It almost seems like he enjoys stirring the pot, even if it creates tension and maybe even hurts the people around him.
And there were consequences. Leaf says that whole incident led to him getting fired from ESPN. He was pulled from the rest of the season's games just one day after that on-air argument.
Wow, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
It sounds like it went way beyond just a disagreement and had real effects on the people involved. Did ESPN ever say anything publicly about all this?
Nope, they stayed completely silent, which just makes it even more mysterious and raises questions about how they handle these kinds of situations.
So where does all this leave us with Pat McAfee? Is he a visionary or a grifter or, like you said earlier, is it just more complicated than that?
He's a complex guy, that's for sure. He's got both brilliance and recklessness. He's super talented. There's no doubt about that he's shaken things up in sports media, and he's built this massive, loyal following. But he's also shown that he can be impulsive and that he's willing to cross the line, even if it means hurting other people.
It feels like he's always walking this tightrope between being entertaining and being responsible, and sometimes he falls off and people get hurt.
In the end, it's up to each of us to decide how we feel about him and whether we want to support what he does. But what's important is that we talk about these things, that we don't avoid the tough questions, and that we hold people with power accountable for their actions.
It's a good reminder that when you have someone who's charismatic and controversial, figuring out if they're actually a good person or just a really good con artist is never easy. You have to think critically, analyze things carefully, and look beyond the surface.
And that's exactly what we try to do here on Grifter or Gifted. We take a deep dive into the lives and careers of these controversial figures, break down their motives, their actions, their legacy, to help you, the listener, come to your own conclusions.
So is Pat McAfee a force for good, or is he just a self-serving provocateur? We've laid out the facts, the controversies, the different opinions. Now it's your turn to decide, grifter or gifted. The answer, as always, is up to you.
Yeah, it really makes you think, do we separate the person from their work, or do we hold them accountable for what they do, especially when they have such a big platform?
Yeah, it's a conversation we need to be having. But before we go, we need to talk about one more incident that really shows how complicated all of this is.
You mean that on-air clash he had with Ryan Leaf and Kirk Herbstreit?
Exactly. Leaf was a guest on College Game Day, and he made a comment about a game being the Nobody Wants Us Bowl. He meant it as a joke, but some people didn't take it that way, including Herbstreit.
Right. Herbstreit thought it was disrespectful to the players and the fans, and McAfee, well, being McAfee, he jumped right in defending Leaf and saying Herbstreit was being too sensitive.
So McAfee's in the middle of another conflict this time. It's with his own colleagues. What happened after that?
It got pretty ugly. McAfee even brought up Leaf's past problems and Washington State's football history on his own show. It was like he was trying to make things worse, not better.
That's kind of strange. It seems like he enjoys stirring things up, even if it causes tension, and maybe even hurts people he works with.
And there were real consequences. Leaf says that whole thing got him fired from ESPN. He was taken off the rest of the season's games just one day after that fight on air.
Wow, that's serious.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was more than just an argument, and it had real effects on everyone involved. Did ESPN ever address this publicly?
Nope. They stayed quiet about the whole thing, which just adds to the mystery and makes you wonder how they handle these situations.
So where does all this leave us with Pat McAfee? Is he a visionary or a grifter? Or is it more complicated than that, like you said before?
He's a complicated guy, no doubt about it. He's got this mix of brilliance and recklessness. He's super talented. He's changed things in sports media, and he's built this huge, loyal following. But he's also shown that he can act without thinking. And he's willing to cross the line, even if it means hurting others.
It seems like he's constantly balancing between being entertaining and being responsible. And sometimes he loses his balance and people get hurt.
Ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what we think about him and whether we want to support him. But what's important is that we have these conversations, that we don't shy away from the tough questions, and that we hold people accountable for what they do, especially when they have a lot of power and influence.
It's a reminder that in a world where being charismatic and controversial often go together, figuring out if someone's truly a good person or just a really good con artist is tough. You have to think critically, really analyze things, and look deeper.
That's what we try to do here on Grifter or Gifted. We dig deep into the lives and careers of these controversial people. We break down their motivations, what they do, how they remember to help you, the listener, make up your own mind.
So is Pat McAfee a force for good or a self-serving troublemaker? We've given you the facts, the controversies, the different points of view. Now it's your turn to decide grifter or gifted. The answer, as always, is in your hands. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Pat McAfee. We'll be back next time with another fascinating figure and the question that always lingers, grifters or gifted. Until then, keep those critical thinking caps on, and we'll see you soon.